LCT if you want, LCTV if you want. All right, we are now live on YouTube TV.
We're all set? Okay, everybody, welcome. Sorry for the delay here a little bit. We're here at the town hall. I'm Rich Lascelles. I'm joined here in the conference room with Kim Queenan, Mark Cloutier, and Cutter. They're going to be participating in the discussion tonight. And everybody that's online, you can feel free to chime in, to ask questions, or raise your hand to contribute in any way. Just on your screen, on your WebEx screen, you should be able to raise your little virtual hand, and we'll recognize you. Our goal tonight is just kick off to give you some info, to update you and provide you with the latest information as we know it. As you know, we're all here because Pennichuck has requested a rate increase. I guess they feel that the exorbitant prices that we're spending now aren't nearly enough, so they've asked for a rate increase. So that's why we're here. There's really, if you think about it, there's three issues with water in Litchfield. One has to do with the St. Gobain PFOA situation, which is ongoing. We also have an issue with water quality, with the discoloration of the water that we see coming out of the faucets. And the third thing, of course, are the rates. We're not here tonight to discuss the quality of the water. We're not here to discuss PFOAs. We are here to discuss the issue with the rates. We really have three choices with respect to this rate increase. The first choice is to do nothing, which probably happens in a lot of cases with rate increase requests. We have the choice of fighting in every way that we can, and a long-term choice, which we're going to touch on tonight, although it's not something that we're going to be able to do overnight, but something long-term is to do what Hudson did and to take over the water system. Again, that's a long-term thing. It involves a lot of issues, and we'll touch upon that, but you know, that's something that we just have to keep thinking about. We're going to have a few guest speakers that are going to come in. One is the town administrator, Troy Brown. He's going to talk about the attitude or the stance that the town has taken or is taking or might take. I have to tell you, I'm here, although I'm a selectman, I'm here as a private citizen tonight. The selectmen really haven't taken a stance on this issue. That might change in our next meeting, but at this point, I am just like you folks. I'm a private citizen. But we're also going to have Dmaurice Kries, who is the consumer advocate from the PUC. He's going to talk about the PUC process. the process that the Public Utilities Commission goes through. We're also going to have a person from a fellow by the name of Elvis Dima, who is from the Hudson Water Company, who's going to talk about what they have done. Kim is here tonight because she's our representative to the Nashua Regional Planning Commission. And she's here to update everybody on what the NRPC, what stance they've taken so far on this. So Kim, could you?
Sure, thank you. My name's Kimberly Queenan. I'm a member of the Vice Chairman of the Planning Board and Vice Chairman of the Heritage Commission. As a planning board member, we're allowed for the size of our town to have 2 members of this town represent us at the NRPC. The National Regional Planning Commission is comprised of 13 towns, Litchfield and our surrounding towns. That'd be Litchfield, Hudson, Pelham, Nashua, Merrimack, Amherst, Hollis, Milford, Mount Vernon, Brookline, Mason, Wilton, and Leidenborough. On December 16th, I saw Rich's posting and about this, trying to get the grassroots effort going. And I pinged him and said, it just so happens I have a meeting tonight with NRPC quarterly. Would you like me to bring this up? And he did. At the end of our meetings, what NRPC does is these 13 towns is we try to look at anything regional in our area that we can maybe work together to solve. I had, when it became Litchfield's turn for the round table, I made 5 statements. Again, Nashua is part of this NRPC, so we had to be, nice about it. All right. I will read the 5 statements I made, and 3 of the members responded, which I would like to read to you. And maybe we can take some follow-up action after we talk with Rich, because I don't know what has moved since the 16th. All right, overall, what I said. With respect to the town of Nashua, who owns Pennichuck East and is a fellow member of the NRPC, we are concerned about the proposed 21% plus water rate hike, and that we would like to have a discussion with Pennichuck as to why the rate increase is so high. Not only does it impact our homes and businesses, we are also trying to determine if this impacts our already expensive fire hydrant fees. That Rich LaSalle, one of our town board of selectmen members, was in an initial inquiry phase of talking with Pennichuck East customers, towns, to see if they are also concerned with high water rate increases. Again, this inquiry is being done so that we can have a discussion with Pennichuck East and gain understanding of why the rate hike is so high. This is a quick moving inquiry taking about 6 weeks of time. I said to the commissioners that if your town is also experiencing a large rate increase and it is an issue of concern, you may not be alone out there. If you are affected, what do you want to do? Please reach out to Rich L. or myself, and I will get your information over to Rich LaSalle. The final statement I made is Londonderry, who is in a different commission, not NRPC, has already raised a concern. We are not sure if Pelham or Merrimack are dealing with this, or other towns in NRPC are as well. This may even be affecting other far-flung towns such as Exeter and Conway, again, in different commissioners than NRPC, and is being researched. Now, again, these 4 members walked into this that night, right? So David Hennessy from Pelham, he's on the Zoning Board of Adjustments, and he's an NRP commissioner. He pinged during the meeting that there are 2,000 Pelham customers that use Pennichuck East. David Tenza, Nashua Board of Aldermen, NRPC commissioner and a lawyer, he verbally commented that Nashua, who, Pennichuck East is owned by Nashua, that even Nashua had seen their rates go up also. They fought the rate hike, but Pennichuck East even said no to Nashua. Bill Boyd from Merrimack, town councilor, NRPC commissioner, he verbally said Merrimack Villages, which is about 70% of their town, does not use Pennichuck East. He said the remaining Pennichuck East serves 30% of Merrimack, but there are some exclusive agreements, such as with the outlets. And that's how they left it with me on the 16th.
I think Pelham is the second, correct me if I'm wrong. Pelham, Litchfield is the largest customer of Pennichuck East. I think Pelham is second. I think we have something like 2,600 customers. in for Pennichuck East in Litchfield, and I think Pelham has 2,000. So, is that correct, Mark?
Yeah, so the numbers that I got from Donald Ware, Pennichuck's chief operating officer, said that we had a little more than 2,400 customers. And since 2017, we've increased almost about 20%
In usage or
in
customer?
new customer base. I think propensity of that was certainly the 11-mile build that Pennichuck had built for the PFOA issues, and then just new residents that are coming into town,
Right.
as well as new homes that are being built.
Yeah. They built under the Merrimack River, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're connected to the Nashua wastewater. That was the second system.
Is Troy Brown on the line? Do you know, Matt? Can you see if Troy Brown's on the line?
I'm here.
Troy, could you update us on the town situation?
Sure. Sure. So, as Rich had mentioned earlier this evening, we as a board of selectmen have not had a chance to discuss this, but it will be placed on the agenda for December the 28th. I think this is a situation where, as we just heard, we have about 2,400 customers in this town. It's an issue that we continue to hear taxpayers raise concerns about. So we'll have a discussion Monday night as a board. And I think some of the discussion points will be first and foremost, if we wish to become interveners, so we can follow this petition to the PUC regarding the rate increase. I don't see any reason why the board wouldn't support that. Second, I plan on having a discussion with the board members about if there's an interest and need to maybe seek special legal counsel. So you see if we can get legal representation that specialize in this area. My general feeling is that Pennichuck probably has exceptional legal representation. They frequently go to the PUC for various reasons. And I think probably 3 years ago, they were there for a rate increase. So, I think we need to have special legal counsel so we understand what the proper steps are to protect the interests of Litchfield taxpayers and users. It's kind of interesting here in Litchfield. We have a large percentage of our taxpayers on the water system. But we also have fire hydrant rentals. All taxpayers pay a portion of their tax bill towards the fire hydrant rentals. So even if you're a taxpayer in town and you're on a private well, you're still paying towards our annual cost of about $500,000 towards the fire hydrant rentals. And with these rate increases that we've seen over the last few years, we've gone from, don't quote me exactly, but combined with the PFOA, St. Gobain waterline extension project and rate increases, we've gone somewhere from $300,000 up to $500,000. And every time we see a rate increase like this, that $500,000 continues to jump. $500,000 in this town is a lot of money. We have some pretty robust discussions, both on the school and town government side, on trying to meet the capital needs of the towns and schools. And, it all focuses around the cost of bond payments. So this is what we're talking about here. $500,000 every single year going towards fire hydrants. So I think it's a worthy cause for the selectmen to really get involved, seek out legal counsel that can represent this town and the board of selectmen, and really figure out what's going on here. I hope that there's even a way that maybe we can seek out an expert in this area, not just someone with a legal background, but maybe more engineering that can really take a look at the operating budget and what Pennichuck is presenting to the PUC, and to make sure that I say this without any factual information, but on the surface, it almost appears that Litchfield could be subsidizing some of the smaller communities that are out there in the Pennichuck East community. Pennichuck East, I think, if you go look at the communities that are in there, some of them may have been private water systems that were taken over by Pennichuck. We don't know what kind of condition they were in when they were taken over. A lot of Litchfield residents are new developments. We know St. Gobain paid for all the water line extensions. So, I don't know how bad our infrastructure here is. It's Pennichuck's, but my guess is that a lot of the developments paid for the water line extensions, and we know St. Gobain paid a big price, over $20 million for water line extension. So the real question is too, why can we be self-rated? Can Litchfield take a look at just our community, and what's the process so that we can become self-rated? I don't know if that's to our advantage or not, but those are the things that we need to look at.
Troy, I can
Rich, we do
actually,
have
I can actually speak
Excuse me.
to a couple of those. I actually had a pretty lengthy conversation with Donald Ware, who was the chief operating officer, and I'd asked that exact question. Could Litchfield, and I asked from a consumer standpoint, have we discussed looking at separation of, Pennichuck? Because in some of the factual information that he was able to give to me was that 31% of their total revenues up till November of this year was all, Litchfield consumed 31% of their revenues for 2020 up till last month. That's a substantial number. And there's 29 systems that Pennichuck manages today. And it is true. I mean, Litchfield does have the largest system, followed by Pelham and then Londonderry. Our revenues consummate a general population fund that goes into their architecture, changes, any additions, any ongoing maintenance costs. So we're shouldering a substantial amount of the costs, for these 29 communities. And that was the apprehension.
Okay.
Rich, we have a member that has a question. You okay taking a question? Ralph Bowman, go ahead, unmute your phone. Ralph, you can proceed with your question, unmute your line. Sorry, Rich, I guess he's not prepared to ask this question. There was a request from people listening to reintroduce the members of the board.
We'll open it up to questions later on.
Okay, wait a minute. I had a problem unmuting myself. This is Ralph. Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. The thing is, on the biggest use of the fire hydrants in Litchfield is Pennichuck. That's what they use to purge their lines. When's the last time the fire department used the fire hydrant? I don't know. But anyway, also, I think we really need to look at seeing if the PUC would entertain looking at the breakdown. Somebody said 31% that we're paying, but what are these other tiny towns paying as a percentage? What if Litchfield, Londonderry, and even Pelham became Pennichuck East 1 or something like that? What would our water rates be? Also, most of the water that we're buying from Pennichuck East is Litchfield water. Hudson bought the wells some years ago. Pennichuck East is buying that water from Hudson and selling it back to us. That to me is a problem. I know when this came up many years ago of the water company at that time being sold to Hudson. Also, too, I guess maybe look at what are the taxes Hudson paying for the wells. I mean, that was an issue some years ago, and it's supposed to be fair market value of the wells, but I don't know what the end issue of that is. So there's a lot of questions we need to have answered, and I think the big one is, like Troy said, are we subsidizing all these other small towns? We're paying 31% of the cost, but what does that cost? And to me, I don't see how. But like Troy mentioned, none of the lines they put in, they paid for. The developers paid for them. St. Gobain is paying for the latest ones. So what? I mean, I don't know of any upkeep they've done to any of these lines other than
All right.
flush their lines. So we need to really look at that. Thank you.
At this point, I'd like to introduce Dmaurice Kries, who is the consumer advocate for the Public Utilities Commission. The PUC is the state agency that's tasked with regulating the utilities. So, Don, if you're on the line.
I am indeed on the line. I created some notes for myself in the form of a PowerPoint show, and I could share them if folks would like, or I can just use them as my notes. It's sort of up to you all, whatever you think would be useful. Say what I didn't quite hear.
Share.
Okay, I will do that. Does that work? Can you all see my notes now?
Yes.
All right, great. So let me start with some basic principles, and I'm probably going over, well, first, let me just thank you all for inviting me to talk to you all. This is my favorite subject, utility rates. It's what I do for a living, and talking about them with folks who are interested in the rate impacts of what their utility is doing, that's what I live to do. So thank you. I will probably go over some ground that we've already plowed this evening, and I apologize if any of this is repetitive, but most of it does bear repeating several times because it can be a little counterintuitive. I want to start with a few basic principles, and let's see if I can get...
That DW 20-156, that is the docket number. If you go to the PUC website, that's the docket number for this rate increase. Sorry, Don.
Yes, correct. So let me just start with some basic principles. Our public utilities, which are electric, gas, and water companies, are regulated monopolies, and the PUC has the authority and the responsibility to set their rates. And the idea is to set prices that would mimic what a competitive market economy would generate if you could actually pick and choose who your water service provider is. By statute, the Public Utilities Commission is the arbiter between the interests of the customers and the interests of the regulated utilities and their owners. As has already been pointed out this evening, utilities tend to be very well represented at the PUC by both really good lawyers and by really well qualified, articulate, knowledgeable experts. So that comes around to me. My office, the Office of the Consumer Advocate, represents the interests of residential customers at the PUC and elsewhere. Our enabling statute is RSA 363-28. And there are a couple of things I do want to make pretty clear at the outset. One is, I don't actually work at the PUC. My office, the Office of the Consumer Advocate, is independent of the PUC. My office is located right down the hall from the PUC's, which is usually pretty convenient when everybody is meeting in person. And the other thing I need to say is that I'm an attorney because the consumer advocate has to, by statute, be an attorney. I am a lawyer, but unfortunately, I am not your lawyer. And I think that the folks who are running the town understand that because you've already heard talk of possibly hiring a lawyer to represent the town. I represent the interests of residential customers as a group, and I do not represent any individual customers or even any individual group of customers. And that is highly germane in this situation because I've already heard you talking about your concerns about potential cross-subsidization as you look at the niche you occupy in this utility versus other communities that are also served by the same utility. I represent all the residential customers, no matter what town they live in. Can you see is my anatomy of a rate case slide showing? I hope that's what's on the screen. It's hard to see. All right, great. So I just want to go through the basics of what a rate case is. Pursuant to RSA 374 and 378, the Public Utilities Commission is required to assure that rates meet the so-called just and reasonable standard. That's what the statute says. And what does that really mean? Well, it means that every utility has to have a reasonable opportunity to earn a return on the investment made by its shareholders. And if that reasonable opportunity doesn't exist and the rates are too low to allow for that, then a constitutional lawyer would say the rates are confiscatory, meaning essentially that we have violated the Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution by effectively taking the utility's property without just compensation. So the key determination that has to be made in this and any rate case is what is the utility's annual revenue requirement? And how do we figure that out? Well, there's a pretty simple and straightforward formula. We take the utility's annual operating costs, what it actually costs to run the business, and we add that to the utility's rate base times its weighted average cost of capital. Well, what's rate base? Rate base is the current depreciated value of all of the company's assets that they use to provide service. So you've already been talking about pipes and wells and things like that. That's what we're talking about. And fire hydrants if the utility owns them. And then the weighted average cost of capital is basically what it costs to finance the utility. And most utilities are financed by some combination of shareholder equity and debt. Debt is borrowed money, equity is invested money. And those are the basics. So it sounds like you all are keenly interested in what happens after we determine the revenue requirement, which is we have to take that revenue requirement and actually turn it into real rates that are actually paid by customers. And that means that the revenue requirement has to be sliced and diced so that everybody pays their fair share of that revenue requirement. So what does that mean? It means that there are different classes of customers. There are residential customers, and there are commercial customers, and there are municipal customers. And then you also talked about intermunicipal equity, and it is true that the cost of serving a community for Pennichuck East that's in some distant corner of its service territory in a freestanding system is probably likely to be quite different than the cost of serving the entire town or substantially all of the entire town of Litchfield. So that has to be figured out, and we will spend a substantial amount of time in this rate case trying to figure that out. And the other issue is, and this is one that is of keen interest to us all the time, is how to divide the costs of the utility between fixed costs and variable costs. The fixed cost is just the amount of money that you pay every month as a customer, regardless of how much water you use. And then the variable costs are the charges that you pay that are based on the meter reading, meaning how many gallons of water you use in a particular period. And in general, we want to see that the actual fixed unwavering costs of the utility are reflected in the fixed charges, and the costs that actually vary depending on how much water service the company provides actually are included in the variable charges. So let me see. Okay. Now, as you've already probably figured out, Pennichuck cases are weird. Why is that? Because Pennichuck East Utility is a subsidiary of the Pennichuck Corporation. The Pennichuck Corporation is an investor-owned utility, just like Eversource is, just like Aquarian is, just like Liberty Utilities is. But unlike every other utility, probably in the whole universe, It has only one shareholder, and that shareholder since 2012 has been the city of Nashua. So Pennichuck, meaning the Pennichuck Corporation and its subsidiaries, are not a municipal utility. They are an investor-owned utility that happens to be owned by a municipality. So the implications of that are pretty significant for purposes of this rate case, because unlike an investor-owned utility, this utility, meaning both Pennichuck East and its parent company, Pennichuck, don't earn a return on investment. They don't incur a cost of capital. The utility is entirely financed using debt. So the good news is that debt is cheaper than equity. And so that the company claims, and I think somewhat credibly, that that helps keep their rates lower than they would have been if the city of Nashua hadn't bought the utility in 2012 and it remained truly an investor-owned utility. And the other piece of this is that rather than worrying about what's a return on investment to shareholders, what the utility worries about most is maintaining the cash flow that it needs to service its debt. Now, the bad news from all of that is that that makes it pretty difficult to hold the utility accountable. If we were talking about regulating the Aquarian Water Company, it is easy, or at least possible, to, in effect, punish the utility for bad behavior by reducing the amount of money that it is able to return to shareholders. But in a company like this that doesn't have return maximizing shareholders, that kind of penalty or that sort of incentive isn't really available. And as to any utility that's owned by a municipality, to the extent that there are customers outside that municipality that are customers, it's important to make sure that the company isn't favoring its native customers, the citizens of Nashua, at the expense of folks who rely on the company for water service but who don't live in Nashua. Because as people who don't live in Nashua, you don't get to have that direct control over the utility through your city government, and you can't punish the management of the utility directly for bad management because you don't own the utility the way Nashua does. So what's in this particular rate case? Well, let's start with their last rate increase. Back in 2018, the PUC approved a rate increase of almost 18%. It was retroactive to 2017. And here in this rate case, the company is seeking really rate increases in two phases. The first phase is so-called temporary rates, and they're looking there for basically an effective rate increase of 10%. And then they would like a permanent rate increase of 21.5%. Now, the important thing to keep in mind about rate increases and temporary and permanent rates is that the permanent rates, once they are approved, are essentially retroactive to the date that the company originally requested its rate increase, which I believe is sometime this month. And so the purpose of temporary rates is to allow the utility to kind of get a running start on recovering its rate increase, because if you didn't have a temporary rate increase, then at the end of the rate case, customers would be in the hole because the rate increase date is retroactive and you'd have to pay the company extra money in order to catch up. Hopefully that makes sense. So at the time that the city of Nashua acquired the Pennichuck Corporation, they were projecting that rates would increase about 2.9% every year. And they are now claiming in their rate case filing that they have been able to meet those projections, which they claim are less rate increases than you would have seen if the utility had remained investor owned. And the company says, well, we've met that 2.9% goal except for property tax increases. The important thing to keep in mind is that property taxes paid by any utility are considered a recoverable operating expense. So even though a lot of people that I've talked to over the years are convinced that when they increase a utility's property taxes, that's something the owners of the utility pay, that isn't the way it works. It's actually the ratepayers who are on the hook for property taxes. So, and the Pennichuck East utility is also looking for changes to certain automatic adjustment mechanisms that they have already adopted in connection with Pennichuck Waterworks, which serves mostly Nashua. And the idea there, I think, is to allow the company to increase rates without going through the expense and bother of a full rate case as often as they have been doing, i.e. every 3 years. So what is going to happen in this particular rate case? Well, the first thing I should say is that this is an adjudicative proceeding. So even though the PUC is an administrative agency, it operates somewhat the way a court does. And the analogy here would be to litigation. The rules are a little different than what you would see in a trial court like the New Hampshire Superior Court, but there is a certain resemblance. On December 17th, so just last week, the commission officially kicked the case off by putting out what is known in the trade as an order of notice and suspension order. The rate increase was suspended for 18 months. Again, the retroactive date, though, is December 24th. And, 18 months is interesting because ordinarily the PUC's enabling statute says that the PUC can suspend a rate increase for up to 12 months. But because we're in the middle, or hopefully getting towards the end of a pandemic, the governor issued an emergency order, I think all the way back in March, saying that suspension period will be extended to 18 months, and the PUC is definitely taking advantage of that. And so that gives the PUC 18 months to resolve the case rather than just a year. The order issued on December 17th set January 22nd as the deadline for intervention. What is intervention? Well, when you request intervention, and if your request is granted, then you become a full party to the rate case, which means you have the right to do everything every other full party does. And Representative Lascelles has already filed an intervention request. I heard the town indicate that it is likely that it will take the same step. The commission will grant the town's intervention petition, and I predict that it will also grant the petition of Representative Lascelles because he is a customer of the company, and any customer of the company is considered eligible, qualified to be an intervener. So if you want to participate as a fully empowered litigant in the case, do get your intervention request in by January 22nd. I often tell people that intervention provides you with a lot of rights that you can but don't have to exercise, and it imposes relatively few obligations on you. So it's a good deal regardless of how aggressive you actually intend to be as the rate case proceeds through its various activities. And as I mentioned earlier, there are two phases to the rate case, temporary and permanent rates. And again, temporary rates are just a way of letting the company start the process of raising rates. That is supposed to ease what is referred to in the trade as rate shock, meaning imposing the whole rate increase all at once 18 months from now. And it reduces the extent to which the customers are in the hole to the company for the rate increase because the rate increase will be retroactive to December 24th of this year. The fiction that the PUC uses is that direct testimony is presented to the commission in writing, and the company already submitted its direct testimony in writing when it made its original rate case filing a few weeks ago. And then the only thing that actually happens at the hearing that the PUC conducts is cross-examination of witnesses. So as I said, the company filed its testimony with its rate case filing. The next event is a pre-hearing conference on January 27th. That's an opportunity for the commission to rule on intervention requests and to hear initial positions, similar to some of the ones I've already been hearing tonight from all of you. And then after the pre-hearing conference, there'll be an informal conference of the parties. That's referred to at the PUC as a technical session. And one of the key tasks at that technical session is to try to reach agreement on the schedule for the rest of the proceeding. That has not been established yet. And also at that technical session, it's an opportunity to ask at least initial questions about the company's filing and what we need to know about it, what we agree with about it, and what information we still have to seek. How do we seek information from the company? We do, as in court, we conduct a process called discovery. At the PUC, discovery generally occurs through issuing written questions to the utility that it then is required to answer in writing. So there'll be initial discovery, followed by written testimony from the staff of the Public Utilities Commission, which operates as if it were a party, the interveners, and also my office. Then after all of that written testimony is filed by all of the other parties other than the company, there's another period of discovery. The company is typically given an opportunity to file rebuttal testimony. Then there is one or more settlement conferences where everybody talks about whether everybody can reach enough of a compromise so that the case isn't presented on a fully contested basis to the PUC. Then there's a hearing before the PUC, and the PUC considers the record that is developed at the hearing and issues an order in which it decides what the new rates will actually be. And then after all that is done, then there's a sort of an extra innings phase of the rate case in which the staff of the PUC works with the company to figure out what the company's rate case expenses were, because unfortunately those too are recoverable from customers. And so if the company didn't squander resources on the rate case and spent them prudently, those costs will be added to the company's rates as a surcharge that is payable until those costs have all been recovered. I think that's everything I have to say by way of an introduction. There is my contact information on the screen. That's my direct telephone line here at the Office of the Consumer Advocate. I do spend a lot of time working remotely these days, but if you call that number, it bounces to my cell phone when I'm not at the office like I am right now. And there is my email address, donald.kreis, K-R-E-I-S, @oca.nh.gov. I love answering questions about this whole process. And even though I can't represent anybody other than my office, I try to provide as much informal assistance as I can, because I think the public interest is well served when there is robust public participation in PUC proceedings. And it clearly seems like that is destined to happen here. And that is excellent. I salute all of you for your interest. So that is my prepared spiel. I would be delighted to answer any questions that any of you have.
To kick off the questions, thank you very much, Don, for that. It was very informative. I noticed that on the website for the PUC, there have been a number of people who have communicated with the PUC and have a negative statement, if you will, toward this rate increase. I think there were, as of Friday, I think there were 9 people, and 7 of them were from Litchfield. So my question is, from the PUC standpoint, does the squeaky wheel get the grease?
I think that my answer to that question in general is no, but the commission does read those comments, and you are allowed to, and the commission will read comments that are filed all the way through the date of the ultimate hearing, which could be up to 18 months from now. And if you aren't able or not interested in becoming a full intervener, you can file comments and they will be read, but they're not considered evidence in the proceeding, and people who file comments don't have the right to participate in any other fashion other than just getting those comments in there, and then they will pop up on the commission's webpage that relates to this particular docket. And that reminds me, I should say that the PUC has an excellent website, and on the PUC's website, every proceeding, including this one, has its own individual page, and everything that gets filed in the rate case that isn't confidential gets put up on that webpage, and you can monitor the progress of the rate case as it moves along. Just earlier today, I happened to check the website of the Vermont PUC because I'm interested in a case that's going on over there. Their website is nowhere near as good as ours is. So although I'm the first person to complain about the PUC when I think it's not doing a good job, Their website is actually quite functional, and we're lucky to have it because it does allow all of us, and certainly all of you, to keep track of what the PUC is doing. People who want to comment but not intervene can also ask the PUC to put them on what's called the courtesy service list. And that means that you will get via email a copy of everything that the PUC issues in the rate case, all the PUC's orders and informal letters and things like that. What you don't get by being on the courtesy service list is everything everybody else files. In order to be guaranteed receiving all of that stuff, that's when you have to become an intervener, because when you're an intervener, the commission's rules say that all of the other parties have to make sure that you are served with everything that they file at the PUC.
Okay, at this point, what I'd like to do is open it up to citizens who are on the line to see if they have any questions for Mr. Kries.
Sure. For the remote participants, to raise your hand on the phone, hit *3. If you are on the computer, hit your participant window and hit the raise hand button. As I see the hands raise up, I will proceed to unmute you, and you'll do a *6 or unmute your client.
My phone just dinged, and guess who it is? It's Jason Brannon.
He must be one of the YouTube live watchers asking questions.
A question here is, does the PUC have the power to break up Pennichuck East into two separate sub-utilities, even with a different rate structure?
I think the answer to that question is yes, but that is an extremely unlikely outcome. There is a municipalization statute. So if you go back to, around 2004, when Pennichuck Corporation was an investor-owned utility, actually publicly traded, the city of Nashua decided it wanted to municipalize Pennichuck Corporation, meaning take it over. There's a statute that says that that municipalities can do that, and so the city filed a municipalization petition. I have never seen a more hotly contested proceeding at the PUC. An investor-owned Pennichuck Corporation treated it like municipalization was the death penalty, and they resisted it with everything they had. Finally, the city of Nashua sweetened its offer so significantly that I think the board of the Pennichuck Corporation had a fiduciary responsibility to pass that offer along to its shareholders, who accepted the offer. That was done by agreement. You can ask the PUC to force the utility, and I think this does apply to Pennichuck because it still is considered an investor-owned utility. You can force them to sell their system to you can force them to sell their system in Litchfield to the town of Litchfield. The problem with that, or the challenge of that from your standpoint, is you have to pay them. And arguing about how much to pay them is a very difficult proposition. And most towns that have tried it, Nashua being the exception, have concluded that it's not an affordable proposition. And you have this huge argument about how to value the utilities assets. The PUC has plenary authority over the state's public utilities, and it can order them to do all kinds of things. But I have never seen the PUC get that proactive and aggressive as to say to a company like Pennichuck East, you know what, we want you to break up into several utilities because we don't think that the customers of the utility are well served by one utility serving so many different municipalities. The trend is actually in the opposite direction. As I think somebody suggested earlier, there were lots and lots of really small independent water utilities historically around the state, and the PUC has systematically acted to encourage them to be taken over by the bigger utilities, so that there are relatively few of those individual utilities left. And I think that's the reason that you see Pennichuck East owning and operating so many satellite systems in various far-flung corners of the state. Sorry, that was such a long-winded answer.
Mr. LaSalle, we have a question from Ralph Bowman. Ralph, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my question, based on what was just said, is can the PUC order Pennichuck East to give a breakdown of each town and whatnot they own, water system, to a breakdown of what their costs are per town or per municipality, whatever you want to say it, to see how much we are really paying as compared to what so example, Ware, I believe, is one of them. What their costs to Ware and what's their receipts? I mean, I think that's something that should be looked at.
My answer to that question is yes, absolutely. Not only can the PUC order the company to disgorge that information, but I would argue that the PUC has a responsibility to do that. And I would further point out that if you become an intervener, you have the ability to participate in discovery. So you can send the company discovery questions and directly ask the company yourselves to, provide that kind of information. It's totally relevant because, as I said earlier, it is important that rates follow cost causation principles. You, as a citizen of Litchfield and a customer of this company, should only have to pay costs that are reasonably attributable to your use of the company's service. Now, that said, there is a practical reality here, and that is that the PUC doesn't set individual rates for every single customer of every single utility. So in any utility's rate structure, there's always some degree of cost subsidization, right? Some of us are just closer to the company's wells. Some of us are more difficult to serve because we call the company more often with complaints or questions or concerns. So there are all sorts of reasons why any individual customer might cost the utility more or less to serve. We tend to lump customers into rate classes and treat them all as if they're identical when they're not really, but that kind of oversimplification is, I think, a necessary evil of the process.
Next question is from Mark Cloutier.
Hey, Don, I had a pretty lengthy 40-minute conversation with Pennichuck's chief operating officer, Donald Ware. They were very transparent about what the costs were, or excuse me, what we were paying. He actually went on record and stated that we were part of their overall revenues. Litchfield, there's 29 systems in total that are being managed by Pennichuck East Utilities. And of those 29 systems, Litchfield has been responsible for 31% of their total revenues for the year. It was pretty shocking to learn that figure. But, I guess my question is, and this maybe more for the town, is who came up with the total costs and negotiations with St. Gobain? Because I'm here, what I've heard tonight is that our costs for the hydrants were $300,000 and they've raised to $500,000. And who's to say that doesn't go up by another $100,000 as we add more citizens and such? I understand the Department of Environmental was involved in that, as was the PUC, and but was the town of Litchfield engaged with? And St. Gobain paid for the capitalization costs for the 11 miles and connecting, 400 plus households. But I don't hear that St. Gobain is paying for any operational costs of the additional hydrants or any of the additional costs, ongoing maintenance, or any of the flushings or any emergency maintenance. I mean, that's shouldered by the Litchfield residents, and hence why I think a lot of our 21% of these cost increases are systemically coming from.
Could I just leap in and say a couple of things about that? Well, the first thing I want to say is that I'm glad to hear that you feel you've had a productive dialogue with Mr. Ware. I find, in general, that he and the other important officials at Pennichuck that we deal with are pretty forthcoming and accessible. I think they're honorable people, and I don't think that there's any reason to treat them with suspicion or contempt. And it is a positive sign, as I said, that Mr. Ware was willing to engage with you. You can expect to engage with him further over the course of the rate case. And again, you have the right to ask him or his company specific questions that he has to answer in writing through the discovery process. With regard to St. Gobain, so first of all, St. Gobain, for good or ill, is not a company that is subject to regulation by the PUC. So, to the extent that they have met their financial responsibility for the issues that they caused through polluting groundwater in New Hampshire, that is a matter for the Department of Environmental Services to regulate, not the PUC. When St. Gobain meets its agreed upon responsibilities by building infrastructure that is then turned over to this or any other utility, that's called contributed plant. And it goes into rate base essentially at zero. So the company, the utility, doesn't earn a return on investment when it didn't make the investment because St. Gobain did. That's also true when a developer puts in infrastructure and then turns it over to the company. But you raise a very important point. Contributing plant to a utility doesn't address the question of the increased cost of operating that new plant. And again, that is an issue to wrestle with in this particular rate case. And you have a right to litigate those issues and raise them. You have a right to expect the PUC to address them.
It's interesting too that that the customers, the citizens of Litchfield, who were very happy to have a well, are now forced, if they're in the north end of town and they were hooked up to Pennichuck because of St. Gobain, now they get a water bill every month. Now, Representative Bowman and I have legislation that's pending that would make those water bills, make St. Gobain or any polluter force them to pay those water bills for a time certain. So that doesn't have anything to do with the discussion tonight, but the ongoing cost, the polluter should be liable for that. Are there any other questions for Mr. Kries?
Yes, there is. Christopher Burns, I'm going to unmute, ask your question. Chris Burns, go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I was just wondering if we did want to join Rich in filing the intervention, how we would go about that.
So you have to file a request or a petition for intervention by the deadline, which is January 22nd. And you file it with the executive director of the PUC at her email address. The PUC is working remotely because of the pandemic, so the need to file things on paper is temporarily suspended, which is actually quite convenient. You're supposed to send a copy of that intervention petition to all of the parties on the service list for the docket, which is basically my office and the utility itself at this point. And then as long as you can demonstrate an interest in the outcome of the case, and you're not just intervening because you're interested, the company or the PUC will typically grant your petition. And as I said, the PUC does grant intervention petitions based on people being customers of the utility. So that's how it works.
Chris, and for anybody else who wants to file as an intervener, I did navigate through that process, and there's a template that if you just put your name in rather than mine, that you can use. And I can help anybody that wants to do that I can help you through that process.
Indeed, I gave Representative Lascelles the template that I have shared with citizen interveners in the past, and I think he used it quite effectively. And you can do the same. And again, I don't think there are a lot of issues with individual customers of this utility becoming interveners. I'd be surprised if the company objected, and I would be really surprised if the company, or if the PUC denied any petitions like that. And I, again, even though I can't represent individual interveners, I really try to do my best to make sure that you, citizen interveners and citizens groups and neighborhood associations who want to do this, don't get confused or overwhelmed and are feeling like they're able to participate effectively. Because I feel really strongly as a ratepayer advocate that we get better outcomes of rate cases when people are able to participate robustly and don't feel frustrated by the process.
We like robust. Any other questions for Mr. Kries?
If there's anybody who would like to ask a question, go ahead and proceed to raise your hand by hitting *3 from your phone, or if you're on the WebEx client, hit the raise the hand button on your participant bar. We have a question from Nikki Forte. I'm unmuting you, Nikki. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming, Mr. Kries. My question is, are the hearings and things that are scheduled for the case, are they taking place in person or virtually at this point?
That's a great question. Right now, they're taking place virtually. Eventually, that will revert back to proceedings in the actual PUC hearing room. I have no idea when that's going to happen. My guess is that it won't be before we have gone through a substantial portion of 2021. And so right now, all of the PUC, all of the events in the docket take place virtually, which makes them quite accessible to the public because they are conducted via WebEx, which is the same platform we're using for this gathering. And it works really well because you can participate right from home.
I have another question from Jeff. Jeff, go ahead. I unmuted you. Ask your question. Jeff, you do need to unmute your line. There you go.
Sorry, I thought you unmuted me. Yes, this is the same question I put into the chat. I'd like to know how many rate increases were actually shut down by the PUC. What history on this? And is the reality that regardless of our participation and involvement, in the end, it's a regulated monopoly and these rates are going to go through no matter what we do? And that's my fear.
That's a terrific question. And I'm going to give a, well, my answer, I hope, will be satisfactory to you. The PUC never rubber stamps rate increase requests. And so I can guarantee you that the company will not receive the rate increase that it requested. This is a game that utilities play. They know that their rate increase requests are never rubber stamped. So they basically pad their rate increase request as much as they plausibly can without seeming ridiculous. And then they're prepared to settle for something that is short of what they've officially requested in their rate case. So if you think that the only way you can feel like you were victorious is if you manage to get the PUC to say, no rate increase whatsoever, request denied, get lost, that is unlikely to happen. That's the bad news. But the good news is, I guarantee you the company will not receive all of the rate increase that it requested. These things always land somewhere in the middle. Oftentimes, they're resolved by settlement agreements. But then in the event there's a settlement agreement, the commission still holds a hearing and asks all kinds of questions and doesn't necessarily have to accept the terms of the settlement agreement. And I've seen this happen several times where the commission will go, well, I realize everybody's settled, but we don't think that's good enough. We think customers deserve an even bigger break. So we're going to push it a little farther than even say that Wise Guy, the consumer advocate, did.
Don, this is Rich Lascelles again. if this rate increase were to go through, we would be paying 3 times the water rate that the town of Hudson pays that happens to get their water from Litchfield. My question is, does the PUC look at a competitive situation? I think we're kind of unique here, and that Hudson and Litchfield, Hudson gets its water from Litchfield, and if this goes through, we're going to be paying 3 times the rate of Hudson. Does that have any bearing on the PUC?
Yes. Even though I said that the company's revenue requirement is really just a mathematical calculation of its operating expenses, to which we add the rate base multiplied by the company's cost of capital, when a particular utility's rates are out of whack with similarly situated utilities and communities, especially in the same area of the state, then the PUC says to itself at both the commissioner and the staff level, hey, something is wrong here. And how can we explain that disparity? That's a legitimate question that you can ask the company about. You can raise at hearing and throughout the proceeding, and you can expect the PUC to address that question. It's highly relevant.
This is a good segue for our next speaker, who is Mr. Elvis Dima, who is the engineer for the town of Hudson water system. And Elvis has a good background of what Hudson did when they, back in 1998, I believe, they took over the Pennichuck water system, and it's now owned by the citizens of Hudson. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Elvis, but I think that Hudson has gone this whole time without any rate increases. So,
yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
yes, we can.
Perfect. So Town of Hudson, and to your point, in 1998, took over what it was to be the Hudson Water Utility. It was a private company. And the reason the town did that is because they were sick and tired of the rate increases. The rates at the time were $3.60, and it was more than Arizona was paying for water at the time. So they bought the system straight out, and they used Pennichuck as their water operator. And you're correct. In 1998, after they bought the company or the utility, they dropped the rates 10% to $3.30. And they've been the same ever since then. So for about 22 years now, the rates have been $3.30. The difference between Litchfield and Pennichuck owning the system is that Pennichuck is still a utility and has a shareholder. You guys will not do that if you own it. That's, I think, the reason why Hudson has remained the rates the same. We try to provide the best services for the water customers and fire protection for the town, without the intent of being profitable. We try not to lose money. That's our intent, but we're not there to make money. So that's the main goal. I've heard a lot. I think Don did a great job describing a lot of things there, and fight the right thing for you guys to do. Unfortunately, Pennichuck, as a utility, has done this for a long time, and I'm afraid for as long as it's justified the rate increase, I think that will be the case. It's tough. It's tough. You guys are exactly where Hudson was 20 years ago in 1998. I totally understand. I've heard the stories, and it's almost like, you know, history is repeating itself. I will take any questions you might have. The wells in Litchfield do provide the water for Hudson and Litchfield. The way it works is when the wells got bought out, 85% is owned by Town of Hudson, and 15% of those wells are owned by Pennichuck. There's also water coming from Merrimack Crossing that was recently put in. Also, there's a crossing in Hudson under Tyler Falls. It's called the Tyler Falls Crossing, and that's where additional water comes in. So water gets wheeled both ways, and water gets provided to other municipalities such as Londonderry, Pelham, Wyndham. So there's a lot of water going around back and forth between different municipalities. And I don't think, unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be something that's going to be steady either. I think you're going to see a rate increase. You're going to see cost increase. You know, we're looking at that too with the PFAS and the more regulations coming in play. So it's not going to be something that it's going to be steady, let's just say for the next 3 to 5 years. I think, unfortunately, looking at the regulations, there's going to be more coming.
Guys, I have a question. I know Pennichuck, we collect almost $500,000 through Pennichuck, you know, for tax purposes. Do we collect the same of Hudson? I know it's probably.
Is that question for me?
Yeah, actually, maybe more for Troy Brown. You're on the call, correct, sir? Are we collecting tax from Hudson as the towns reside in Litchfield?
I don't know if he's on the line.
Am I there?
You're there, Troy. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so we collect about $250,000 a year in property taxes from Pennichuck East. And I don't know off the top of my head, but with the town of Hudson, I believe that we have a payment in lieu of taxes agreement. And I forget what that amount is, but I want to say it's somewhere between, maybe it's $15,000 to $15,000. I don't know.
Right.
I got a question for Mr. Dima that came in on my phone. Can you tell me how much it costs to operate your system in Hudson?
Yes. So we have about 800 hydrants, and our base, it's just about $500,000 a year. That includes taking care of our system, calls, shut-offs, taking care of the hydrants, maintaining them through a program, which is a dry check and a wet check. And that's about $500,000, and it's been going up about 2%. As you're probably well aware too, Town of Hudson in 2018 went out to bid, and Whitewater now is the operator in Hudson, not Pennichuck. That was after 20 years of a partnership with Pennichuck, and due to the cost, we decided to go out, and they were not the low bid. So we hired Whitewater, which is a division of RH White, and they've been going on the 4th year now. And it's up for renewal next year, and they've done a good job, and they keep it. But about the base contract is about $500,000 a year, including 800 hydrants. Basically, the cost of your maintenance for the hydrants alone.
A question for Mr. Kries. What would the PUC's attitude be if Litchfield decided as a town, and I'm talking down the road a ways, but if we decided as a town to join with Hudson or with Manchester, with any of the surrounding towns, and to buy out that franchise for our water system to enable us to join with another town? What would the PUC's attitude be for something like that?
I think in theory and probably in practice, the PUC would be pretty neutral about something like that. The concern that the PUC would have, and I guess to some degree I would have, is it would want to make sure that any customers who don't benefit from the transaction aren't harmed in any way because they're staying behind as the town of Litchfield, say, exits the regulated utility and becomes a municipal utility. And then, of course, as I said earlier, the fight is over about how to value the utility plant, and the PUC has to decide that. So it's serving as the kind of neutral decision maker in a scenario like that. And so I don't think that you can expect the PUC to resist that or be uncooperative.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from the audience? Hearing none, I guess.
Hang on one second. There is one.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Troy Brown. Go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, I just wanted to get back to the question Mark Cloutier asked. I was able to go into our budget. So for property taxes from the town of Hudson, which are again a payment in lieu of taxes, we have $30,000 in the budget as a revenue. So we collect $30,000 in payment in lieu of taxes from Hudson, and about $250,000 a year in property taxes from Pennichuck East.
Thank you.
Mr. LaSalle, we have another question from Jeff. Jeff, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, I have two questions. One is a follow-up from my first question to Mr. Kries. The problem with the response is we just paid for this for a retroactive increase 2 years ago. So why is the idea of saying, no, this increase is going to be shot down entirely out of the question? I mean, if we authorize this one, what's to come back? What's to prevent them from coming back 2 years later and hitting us up with another increase? So this just seems very strange to me. And then my response to the last question, or the last response, is if we're responsible for 31% of the revenue, we're the largest player, as everyone has mentioned. There's no question if we remove from the system, it's going to harm other parties. So if the PUC is going to say no, Litchfield, you can't decide to sell this or join Hudson's system because it's going to impact the smaller players. I mean, that's just a reality.
So I guess I just want to say that I have never seen a rate case be rejected in toto. And I think the reason for that is that inflation tends to raise prices throughout the economy over time. So all of the things being equal, utilities tend to demonstrate that they're entitled to at least some degree of rate increase.
But it was just 2 years ago.
Well, yes, and the commission will in fact be concerned about that. It will say, well, why are you back for a rate increase so soon after your last one? The commission's statute actually says that and I've seen the commission do this, it can actually just throw out a rate case if it's filed within 2 years of the last rate case. That's not the situation here. This last rate case for this company was filed in, I believe, August of 2017. So that is unfortunately longer than 2 years ago. But, again, I don't know, because I haven't investigated it yet, how much of this rate increase request is reasonable and how much isn't. I'm quite convinced that as to this and every other rate case, the right answer, meaning the answer the PUC will adopt, is going to land somewhere in between no rate increase and the full rate increase the company has requested.
So 3 years ago, was 17% was our increase in 2017. And that was passed. And now we're asking for 21%. I think the issue that I continue to see is that we're carrying our revenues contribute towards a general population fund that takes care of 29 other communities. And that's kind of why I want to be here to kind of raise my own concern for the town, is that there's continuous increase of costs, and Litchfield is shouldering, costs for these other 28 other communities. That's my frustration.
I think to echo what Mark just said, I think that's the frustration that we all feel. And but I think this has been a good kickoff for where we go from here. There is a date that was mentioned, January 27th. There's a hearing at 10 o'clock in the morning, a virtual hearing. In the meantime, anybody who wants to file as an intervener, talk to me and I'll get you that template and we can go from there. Also, puc.nh.gov is the PUC's website. The key docket, which is our rate increase docket, is 20-156. So when you go in there, you can poke around. We need participation from as many people as we can to do everything that we can to try to see try to get the PUC to understand how much we're being forced to pay. So thank you very much. We've gone about an hour and a half. Thank you very much for everybody's attention and participation. Thank you to Mr. Kries. We all appreciate it. Thank you, Elvis, for joining us. Maybe we need to put a water meter on our well, and so we can keep track how much water you guys in Hudson are. You're not paying enough for water. We need to charge you more. So I'm just kidding, Elvis. Thank you very much for taking time out of your day to join us. Again, thank you everybody for joining, and have a good night. And if the clouds go away, we'll be able to see the Christmas star. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining the meeting. Hope you all have a great evening.
Thank you very much.